Órale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. This is your host Jorge Martin. It's the NFL Insider Series. I think we're right somewhere between second and third base right now, and on our way home but we're still bringing so many great NFL insiders to you. So you make sure, Familia, we're on YouTube. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe. I know I've seen you guys coming out. Some of these episodes have been blowing up. So appreciate it. Un millón de gracias. Keep watching. This is going to be one that's going to do really well too, because we've got some information from our invitado that is going to make you maybe consider some Ravens in this in your fantasy draft. So yes, also make sure you're going to underdogfantasy.com. Use that promo code Familia23. You're going to get matched up to your first $100 on your first deposit. Now, that dollar for dollar, you put in 100, underdogs are going to put in 100. Just make sure you get in there. Best ball season, Familia. These drafts have been fantastic. I just added another draft this morning, so get in there and get ready. Get ready for your fantasy drafts. Maybe make a little money in the process. So playing the underdog. So So Familia. We've got Kevin Oestreicher from Locked Ravens and Ravens Wire. I mean, Familia, I think you guys may have heard or seen his appearance recently on the Fantasy Points podcast. He's just one of the authorities when it comes to the Ravens. Also, he may have been a good luck charm for Lamar Jackson. So we're going to see if he's been a good luck charm for him this year. Let's welcome in Kevin Oestreicher, mi amigo. Welcome in. Estás en tu casa. Welcome in.
I appreciate you having me on. I know we're right up next to training camp. We're so close to getting there. I know it's been a long waiting period. It feels like every year it feels really long, especially, the NBA finals are done and the NHL is done. The MLB just coming off the All-Star break, but I'm excited for football. I've been waiting for a while. And for the Ravens, which I know we'll be talking about today, a lot of excitement there too, especially when it comes to fantasy. I always say, just as an intro, I remember the days when you wanted nothing to do with the Ravens in fantasy. Like there was no one on that team. It was Justin Tucker, sometimes the defense, but no one else. But now there are a lot of guys you can choose from, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah. Occasionally there was a running back, but really there was just nothing. Yeah, not much. But no, this is, or you wanted their defense. So that was one thing. But well, we're gonna start at the top, tippy top. Lamar Jackson. You saw his breakout in 2019. When he just lit the NFL on fire, was the MVP that season. It was year two of his career. Ever since then, there have been some flashes, but unfortunately, the last 2 years have ended in injury for him and him missing time. Looks like he's back and healthy now. We have the added element of Todd Monken coming over. He made Stetson Bennett a thing and got him drafted in the NFL. Now, what's he going to do with someone as multi-talented, ultra-talented, a borderline unicorn as Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, there's so much excitement, especially with Monken coming in. Greg Roman obviously on the way out now. And I think so many people just wanted to see Lamar Jackson. They're going to get it, but they've wanted to see him just not in a Greg Roman offense, where Todd Monken, I think, is going to open things up a lot more, especially for the passing game. And we know what the identity was, or we at least knew it when Greg Roman was there. It was a run-first offense, and the pass offense went through the tight ends and running backs. Wide receivers weren't really a factor in Baltimore. And they, over the course of their franchise history, they haven't really had a ton of guys who you'd consider, I definitely want to get this guy in fantasy. But, Steve Smith, some Anquan Bolden, some of those Derek Masons. But now they've surrounded Lamar with weapons. And it fits Todd Monken's offense. What he does really well is he adapts to the personnel. He's had a couple of stints as an offensive coordinator, both with Tampa and with Cleveland. In Tampa, his passing offenses were great because that's what the personnel dictated. Mike Evans there, Chris Godwin, and all those guys. But now what you have in Cleveland when he got there was only one season, but the run game, it was Nick Chubb in 2019, and the run game was incredible. And not only that, Odell was with that team in 2019 in Cleveland, and Jarvis Landry, and both those guys had 1,000-yard seasons. So the whole thing with Todd Monken in Cleveland was that was the Freddie Kitchens year, and it was just abysmal for very many reasons. But Monken coming in now, he has the running back still at his disposal in J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Adding Odell with Rashod Bateman. They drafted Zay Flowers. They still have Devin Duvernay. They brought in Nelson Aguilar too, and Mark Andrews. I mean, Mark Andrews, I feel like, is a forgotten man in all this because everybody's been so focused on, they've added all this wide receiver talent. But now under Todd Monken, the thing that I'm looking for, though, and I know it's big in fantasy, is Lamar's rushing attempts. Obviously, when depending on what your scoring is, obviously, if it's the same for rushing and passing, then it's not a huge deal. But obviously, rushing yards in most leagues is a little more valuable than passing yards. So I feel like Lamar's rushing attempts are going to go down this year. But it's not necessarily because you want to get rid of it completely, because he's so good both with his arm and with his legs that you don't want to completely eliminate part of what makes him such a unique player, as you mentioned. But I think with the way that the ball is going to be thrown this year, Lamar's very happy about that. The Ravens offense is very happy about that. But maybe instead of Lamar getting 8, 9, 10 carries a game, maybe it goes down to 5, 6, 7. I wouldn't say it's a huge drop off, but I'd say less of the like RPO stuff that, has kind of been phased out every single season. They haven't needed that as much. But I'm excited for what Lamar's going to be able to do with Todd Monken. It just seems like there's trust to it. Just didn't seem, not that Lamar didn't have confidence in himself, but I just don't think he had confidence within the offense, because I just don't think there was that relationship between Greg Roman and Lamar. But Todd Monken has stated, Harbaugh stated, Lamar said it too. He has the keys to this offense now, the ability to audible out of things, see things for himself with the line, motion a guy over, change the play call. And that, to me, I think already signals trust in your quarterback. And I think that will go a long way, maybe even to having a better on-field performance. Obviously, the health is a very important factor. You can't get rid of that. The 2 injuries have been very unfortunate. But if he's able to stay healthy, I expect a very big year from him this year.
And that's the thing. I mean, well, the health factor, it looks, I mean, that knee injury was not something to be trifled with. I think some people were kind of like, saying things, but that everything looks healed. He's looking full speed ahead. And the other thing is, you mentioned the receivers. Mark Andrews is obviously going to be the top target. So we got him. Do we see him getting used any differently, or is it just going to be, he's going to be the number one option?
Well, I think what the Ravens can do now is they're probably going to operate from a bunch of different sets that we didn't see at least a lot of over the past 4 or so years with Greg Roman, where you can now go out 4 wide and put Andrews in the slot. You can even put him on the outside. There was one play, I think it was Atlanta, where he burned AJ Terrell, who's not a bad corner, burned him down the sideline and ended up catching a ball, and it was a huge gain. So Andrews is a multi-versatile player. And the thing that I love about him is, coming out of college, he was not a good blocker at all. And the way the Ravens tight end room was orchestrated that year, they drafted Hayden Hurst in the first round that year alongside Lamar, but it was Hurst, Andrews, and Boyle. Boyle was kind of the, he's like one of the best blocking tight ends in the league and not really versatile as a pass catcher. Hayden Hurst was the middleman. Like, he was fine as a blocker, fine as a pass catcher, but Andrews was the guy who was the best pass catcher, but the blocking was not good. He has established himself. And the whole thing was, it was whatever side Nick Boyle was on, teams began to figure out, they're going to run to the side Boyle's on and not the side Andrews is on. And that forced Andrews off the field in some certain situations, because they just could not give that away. Andrews has developed, and obviously blocking is not going to do anything in fantasy, right? But I think that it allows him to stay on the field, and it has allowed him to stay on the field, but now gives him the opportunity to where it was the 2019 season was the one where every week, well, even if you say 2022 and Marquise Brown was there, but every week it was like, one guy's going to get a ton of targets and have a huge game, and the other guy's going to get double covered and not do anything. And some weeks it was Marquise Brown, some weeks it was Mark Andrews. So it was very difficult to determine, is this going to be an Andrews week or a Hollywood Brown week? But now you add Odell, you add Zay Flowers with Bateman in there too. It's hard for these guys to double Mark Andrews, or at least send safety help over to cover him, or send a corner over there too, because you have to deal with all these really savvy route runners. And Andrews works so well over the middle of the field and has that connection with Lamar already. So I think that Andrews is still going to be the top target. He'll still get the most targets. Maybe Odell takes that crown. Maybe it'll be close between the two. But the connection Lamar and Andrews have is something special. And you can now use him in a lot of different ways that maybe Greg Roman just couldn't do, because his offense, it just wasn't dictated that way.
And it's kind of interesting to see that dynamic, because the fact that now with all the extra receivers, he's not going to see any extra cover. He can't see any extra coverage, because of the fact that there's so many other options. I think right now, I've got him as my tight end too. And hard to go away from that. There's obviously that other guy at number 1. So he's far out there. So we'll be talking about him soon, Familia. We'll be talking about him soon. But the receiver room. You mentioned OBJ as possibly being someone who could be a someone who competes with Andrews for top targets. Does it look like he's going to be the number one guy on the wide receiver room, and kind of how does the pecking order go from there?
Yeah, I mean, I personally say so. I know there are some people who are of the notion that Bateman's the number one. I mean, I don't think it matters too much. Like, who's one, who's two. It could be either by the end of the season, but a large thing, like we talked about with Lamar, is the health of those two guys. Odell coming off of the ACL surgery after tearing his ACL in 2021 in the Super Bowl that year, didn't play last year, and he feels like that was the best move for his career. Instead of rushing back towards the latter part of the season last year, which I think is the right move too. But the Ravens, I think they're not going to get like a prime New York Odell. Like I think we're past that at this point. But if he can be just even a high-end wide receiver 2 for them, a low-end wide receiver 1, that's what they need. We've talked for so long in Baltimore about, getting Lamar the guy, like at least a high-end 2 that can be a low-end 1, where we've seen Josh Allen get Stephon Diggs and Kyler Murray get DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown. Jalen Hurts got A.J. Brown. For Lamar Jackson, it's been, here's Sammy Watkins, here's Seth Roberts, Des Bryant. And it has caused a lot of people to be like, well, what can Lamar be if he has these wide receiver weapons around him? So I don't think it matters one way or the other, but the key factor is the availability of these guys. And the thing that happened last year was the Ravens went all in on the young guys. Rashod Bateman was their unquestioned wide receiver 1 going into his second season. Devin Duvernay was there too. You had like DeMarcus Robinson, James Prochet, Tylan Wallace. And my whole thing was, look, it's the whole premise of that is fine. Like, I understand their thinking. But if Bateman goes down, that whole room is just done. And not only did Bateman go down for the year, but Devin Duvernay went down too. And all of a sudden you're relying on like the corpse of Deshaun Jackson in a second, like go around of Sammy Watkins. This year, though, they have the depth. So if Beckham has to miss a month, if Bateman has to miss a few weeks, because he's had a couple of injuries over his first 2 seasons, Zay Flowers can step up. Devin Duvernay can step up. Even Nelson Aguilar. The funny thing about it was Nelson Aguilar was the first signing they made this offseason. And the whole fan base was like, not again, like not another past 30 veteran. Like they're doing it again. And my whole thing was, it can be a move. Like Aguilar's fine as a depth piece, but he can't be the move. And fortunately, Odell came to Baltimore, and that was that. So I'm excited for the wide receiver group. If I had to give a pecking order, I'd have it right as I have down below: Odell, Rashod Bateman, and Zay Flowers. But, if Bateman takes over that role by the end of the season and kind of flourishes into what so many people see, then fine. I don't think either of them really care who's labeled as the 1 or who's labeled as the 2. It doesn't even matter at the end of the day, because we're seeing so many the starter position. It's kind of getting eliminated because so many guys play so many snaps anyway, even if they're not a starter. So I'm excited to see the 3 guys in general, especially the trio that Lamar now has at his disposal, with Mark Andrews in the fold as well.
Yeah, and so this is a team that last year when Lamar was on the field in his complete games, he threw about almost 30 times. I think it was like 29.3 average pass attempts. Could we be looking north of 30 on this year just because of all the weapons?
Yeah, I would say so. I think the Ravens, they've said it. They're leaning in to being a pass offense this year, at least more so. And John Harbaugh's made it clear. He made it clear at his press conferences throughout the offseason that they're not going to go completely away from what they've been doing. It's not like Greg Roman's gone. Everything that he did and everything that he built is down the drain. The Ravens rushing offense was really good. The issue was they could not develop a consistent pass game, which has been a theme under Greg Roman, where he'll have one really good, Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco, Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo, the same thing with Lamar in Baltimore, one really good all-around season, and then the passing offense sputtered outside of that. So the key with bringing Monken in is, as I talked about, he can be a good run coordinator. He can have that ability. If the Ravens are running the ball well, he can shift his mindset to being a run team. But he has been adamant that he loves throwing the football. So I would definitely say upwards of 30 for Lamar this year. I think where maybe his workload takes a hit, as I talked about, is probably with his carries. That'll probably go down a little bit this year.
One health question. First health related question. Rashod Bateman, there was some missed time during OTAs and mini camp. What is his expectation for training camp?
Yeah, he had the Liz Frank with the foot injury and had a surgery to obviously get the screws in there, but then had another procedure to get them out. And so that's where he, there's sometimes soreness from missing. And there was a little confusion because people didn't know if he had already had that surgery or if there was discomfort with the screws in his foot and he was going to have the surgery to get him out. So he should be ready to go by training camp, or at least a little bit into it. I think, if he starts missing, I don't even know if he plays in the preseason. I don't know if Baltimore's going to go that route. But if he is available and they're playing their guys and he's not there, then I'd maybe start to get a little worried. But the good news is he's already had the surgery to take him out, which is not that he doesn't have to have another procedure to get them out, which I think would set his timeline back a little bit. So the fact that he wasn't in there, and this is the time of the offseason where it's great to get reps, but not at the expense of aggravating an injury or risking a guy getting banged up. So, you trade the time for Bateman to heal it for the reps, but hopefully he'll be back by the start of training camp. I'm not overly concerned right now. He'll miss the start of the season, but again, if we get into like August and he's not there, maybe like middle of August, then I start to get a little worried. But for now, I'm okay with it. I think he'll be ready.
Okay. All right. Well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I'd love to see this offense. I would love to see this offense. Just everybody full born. I've always said that Lamar is not just a running back. He is a passing quarterback. And I mean, if he's throwing 33 times a season with that receiver group, the line in front of him, and we're about to talk about the running game, I think it's wheels up. He's one of my favorite picks. I mean, he is a guy that I think can be the quarterback one in fantasy football this year, and without rushing for 1,000 yards, because I think he's that talented. So love it. So let's get into one more guy. One more question coming into the season. Now, J.K. Dobbins had the complicated ACL. May have come back too soon, had the cleanup procedure, came back, and his numbers look good. There were a couple of plays. Well, I mean, he looked like he was definitely limping there. Scar tissues can take some time. He's talked about the fact that he was still getting to trust that knee. Could we be seeing that return to health and possibly being going back to being a top tier runner? Maybe not a great threat in the passing game, but definitely, on obvious running downs.
Yeah, I think if he is available for them, he's going to be one of the better running backs in the league this year. I think a definite steal in fantasy. The thing with him, he's a little unhappy with his contract situation. This is a contract year for him, and was not present at mandatory minicamp, and it seems like it was a hold-in, like he reported, but he was not practicing on the field. And I know that there have been some reports of an injury, but it feels like it was actually a hold-in. So we'll see how far he takes that, if that is the case. But if he's on the field, he's a guy's rookie season who averaged 6 yards a carry. It was top mark among all running backs that year. And I think this year we're going to see a shift, because it's been like Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins have been pretty even. I think Dobbins has edged him out by like a hair over the past couple of seasons when both have been on the field. But I think this year we're going to see more of a shift to J.K. Dobbins being the back and Gus Edwards kind of being the complement. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be J.K. Dobbins like a bell cow 25. That's kind of dead across the league, but it's very rare you see like bell cow guys anymore. It's going to be kind of hard in fantasy to gauge like how many carries is this guy going to get one week versus the next in a committee. But I think that Dobbins will get more of the workload in the running back room than Gus Edwards gets this year. And that's not because Edwards is a bad player. I love Gus Edwards as a secondary running back. But Dobbins is so talented with his contact balance, his ability to see the field, his cutback ability. But you're right, where there were a couple of long runs last year where vintage J.K. Dobbins, rookie year J.K. Dobbins, fully healthy J.K. Dobbins would have taken it to the house. But with the cleanup procedure happening, him not being, I guess, close, or at least close enough to 100% where he needed to be, those runs turned into almost touchdowns or just long gains that weren't touchdowns. So hopefully with the offseason here to heal, he'll be in a lot better shape. And I think he's a sleeper pick in fantasy this year, because I think people are kind of looking at, he's just not going to be healthy again. And his numbers look great, but it's been the availability for him. So if you can snag him later because guys are down in his health, I definitely do it, because I expect a big year from him, especially in a contract year if he doesn't get an extension.
Yeah, and in underdog drafts, he's going in the 5th round, which he's been one of the guys that I've been targeting this year, because the fact that it's the first, he had a regular rehab this. I mean, not a rehab, he just had a regular training off season, and a lot of times that's when those guys get close to being back to where they were before. Going in the 5th round right now in underdog drafts, I think that's a steal. I mean, if you guys are going with wide receivers early, I'd be very confident. And our amigo here, Kevin, is I think he's a great. Now is Gus Edwards gonna still be a factor at the goal line? He's just,
yeah, I'd spend a late round pick on Gus Edwards,
yeah.
Final 4 or 3 rounds, because again, the thing with Dobbins is health. And if he's not healthy, I mean, Gus Edwards becomes the one there. I mean, the other guys behind Gus Edwards is Justice Hill, and that's really it. So I think Edwards will get goal line carries, but I think again, what happens is if Lamar's not getting goal line opportunities and they're kind of scaling down his carries and just purely running in, because Dobbins can be a goal line back. Both those guys have the build and the balance and the physicality to be those guys, but they're not going to just give J.K. Dobbins 30 carries a game. So they like Edwards at the goal line. In his first game back against Cleveland, scored 2 goal line touchdowns. So I did like, if you need a bye week fill in, I think Edwards is not a bad play whatsoever, because he's still going to get, I'd anticipate, anywhere from 9 to 12 carries a game, where Dobbins maybe gets like 14 to 17. But that still is a good enough split where Dobbins gets enough carries to be sustainable every week, and Edwards can still have weeks where he breaks out in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, he's. I feel like he's going to be a threat at the goal line a lot, because he's just that big bruising back. Yeah. So, love it. Did we miss anybody? I don't think we missed anybody, or did?
Yeah,
or
not any of the big guys. I mean, there are a couple of sleeper guys here and there that maybe you can target in later rounds, but the big guys, we hit on all of them.
One of the guys I've been targeting really late is the compliment to Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely.
Yeah.
Okay, you smiled. Please feel free.
No, I mean, I'm with you. I'm in a dynasty league, and I tried to stash him for so long, but I ran out of space because I was on a run. Then Kyler Murray got injured. It's a 2-quarterback league, and someone sniped me from Minshew, and I tried to start Nick Foles, and that went really poorly. So I had to drop Isaiah Likely to try to get a quarterback. But that was one of the guys that's like, it stings, because when Mark Andrews missed a couple of games last year, and when Isaiah Likely was on the field, he produced like a high-end tight end one. Like he put up the numbers, put up the yards, the touchdowns. So he's never going to be like the top tight end when Mark Andrews is there. But in the event of an injury, like if you have an extra roster spot, or you need a tight end for a bye week fill in, I think we're going to see an expanded role for Likely in this offense, because he can be used like a wide receiver, even more so. Like I said, you can line up Andrews in the slot and on the outside. You can do that with Likely even more than Andrews, because of his athletic versatility. The height is there. The speed is there. So a lot of people in Baltimore are kind of wondering, what is his role going to be this year, and how is he going to be used? Because in the Greg Roman offense, he was used more as like the inline tight end, because that's what the offense dictated. But with Monken, you could maybe get some like wide receiver snaps from a tight end, which are very valuable throughout fantasy. So I like Isaiah Likely a lot personally, and it's kind of like a late round dart throw.
Yeah, I've been grabbing him sometimes in the last round of underdog drafts, just as my third tight end. And I'm just like, you know what? There were a few weeks there that he performed even with Andrews on the field, but when Andrews was off, he was one of the primary targets. Obviously, there was not OBJ, Rashod, Bateman, and Zay Flowers available. You know what? One last thing on Zay Flowers. How has he looked in camp?
He's looked good. He feels to be a fit for the offense. He's buying in already. And he's a fast guy, a 3-level wide receiver. So he can get your points. PPR, he's going to be, I think, a threat. And he can also line up both on the outside and in the slot. Now, I'd anticipate more slot work for him, honestly, but he has the ability to get open and just, snatch defenders' ankles, work over the middle of the field really well. And he's going to be, I think, a security blanket for Lamar Jackson. Mark Andrews is the top security blanket for Lamar. But in terms of guy, if you need 3 yards, he can get your 5 on a short little route. If you need to throw it deep, he can do that too. Is a third guy. Like, he's not going to be going up against all these like crazy good corners. Beckham's going to get those matchups. Bateman's going to get those matchups. Maybe, depending on who the slot guy is that he faces. And it's all very like, we've gone away from kind of like the Revis Island where guys travel 100% of the game. But even so, Flowers has that shiftiness. He's great in the open field after the catch. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a couple of top 10 wide receiver weeks from him this year, just because of the fact that, maybe guys are doubling Mark Andrews and they're paying attention to Odell and Bateman. And so everybody's all right, well, who's covering Zay Flowers if they run 4 wide and he's that guy? Exactly. He goes straight up the seam and that's that. So he's looked good so far. Very shifty, very versatile. And a guy who I'm really excited to see him in this offense.
And, one of the staples of a John Harbaugh team, sorry, Sorry, John. It has been a solid offensive line. Is this group still considered, pretty intact?
Yeah, I would say, and my whole thing, I'm with you, is it all starts up front for an offense. You got to protect your quarterback, open up rushing lanes, give him time to throw. The Ravens are returning 4 or 5 starters this year on their offensive line. They only lost Ben Powers, who ended up playing really well for them at left guard. He signed a huge money deal with Denver, I think 4 years, 56 million. So he's gone now. They couldn't afford to pay him that. So the one position on that line where there's a little bit of iffiness is left guard. Ben Cleveland, who they drafted a couple of years ago, hasn't really looked the part so far. Maybe he steps it up over the course of training camp, but they've tried a rookie there right now. They've tried Daniel Falele, who was a 4th rounder for them last year. But Ronnie Stanley is one of the best in the business when he's healthy. He's coming off of that ugly ankle injury that cost him a couple of years. Tyler Linderbaum as the center looked really good his rookie season. Kevin Zeitler, he's been a Pro Bowl snub the past 2 years. He should have made it, but he didn't. But he's been one of the best in the business. And then Morgan Moses is a solid tackle over on the right side. So 4 or 5 starters returning is solid for any offensive line, especially with the guys Baltimore has. They just got to figure out left guard, and then they'll be good to go.
Yeah, I mean that's not an easy position to figure out. So hopefully the competition will be good there. So because we need J.K. Dobbins to have plenty of lanes, and I don't want to see. I want to see 17 games out of Lamar Jackson. Maybe sitting 16, maybe sitting week 18, but no, not 17 games from Lamar. Let's see that, por favor. One last question, just kind of on the other side of the ball, and this isn't specifically a question about the fantasy, the Ravens as a fantasy defense. I'm looking more of where are they strong? They've been, traditionally they've been very good against the run. The past couple of years, there's been, especially 2021, injuries just decimated the secondary, and they were one of the easier teams to pass against. How do they look versus the run and the pass this year?
Yeah, well, I think the run game, they lost Calais Campbell. That's a pretty big loss for them. You can't understate how valuable he was for them. They're going to have to rely on a couple of guys stepping up. Justin Madubuike, Broderick Washington, Travis Jones, Michael Pierce. He played really well for the first couple of games of the year, got injured in week 2 and missed the rest of the season. So it's going to be a committee approach to kind of fill that void left by Calais Campbell. Pierce is really good against the run. He's a huge guy in the middle of that defense. Madubuike can provide you both run stuffing and pass rushing ability. But then the thing that I love about the defense is I think one of their strongest positions is inside linebacker. And some of the jobs of these defensive linemen is just to open up the rushing lanes for Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen to just bolt down and hit the running backs. If they're running to the edge, Roquan Smith and the Patrick Queen have the sideline to sideline speed. The Ravens are a super physical defense, even in the secondary. Marlon Humphrey, we know who he is as a coverage man, one of the best in the business, but he's super physical. Rock Ya-Sin is very physical as well, who they signed. So I think the run game for them, they have the ability to replace Calais Campbell in his loss with just other guys. Against the pass, this one's a little more iffy because of the depth. Like, if you just look at their top 4 guys, Marlon Humphrey, Rock Ya-Sin, Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton, those are their 2 corners, 2 safeties. That's really good. Like, the safeties are really good. Marlon Humphrey's great. Rock Ya-Sin's solid. But the depth outside of that, like if Humphrey goes down, they have a lot of young guys who are unproven. And if those guys don't hit, and Humphrey has to miss time, or Ya-Sin doesn't pan out the way they need to and they need somebody else, if no one else steps up and they don't have a veteran to kind of take his place, I mean, they're in an AFC North division that has Cincinnati with Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, and Pittsburgh has George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, and they got Allen Robinson. I mean, the Browns with Elijah Moore they got this offseason, and Donovan Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper. You got to have 3 solid cornerback options you feel good about. I think Baltimore has 2 right now, and they're hoping that one of these 5 or 6 young guys will step up for him. So I think right now I'd feel a little bit better with them against the run because they have been, that's been their more consistent area. And the only guy that really lost was Calais Campbell. But at the same time, if they're able to stay healthy in the secondary, which never happens for them, I always say they start the year with 50 million corners. They end the year with 2. Everybody gets injured. So maybe this is the year with some of the strength and conditioning overhaul. But I think they have, especially with the way they ended the year. They ended the year so strong last year. And the Cincinnati game, the defense played great in the wild card round. And arguably they were a Tyler Huntley fumble away from winning that game on the goal line. It was a 14-point swing. So I'm excited about the defense. But again, it comes down to health for them. And if they're able to stay at least a little bit healthier than they have over the past 2 seasons, I like their chances.
Yeah, you were talking about the cornerbacks. It's like in baseball, they say you can never have enough pitching, and
Yeah.
football definitely you can never have enough
Yeah.
cornerbacks. The way though, especially when there's Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes, one of those guys on the other
Right.
sideline. The 10.5 wins is the number that they're throwing out there for the Ravens. I mean, considering that the AFC North, everyone is going to be good this year. Does that feel kind of aggressive? I do, but I feel like it's perfect line. It could be like they win 10 or 11.
Yeah, I think it's tough because you're not even the AFC North. I mean, the AFC is absolutely loaded this year. So
Minefield.
we're going to see teams like I say like 12.5. I think there are 12.5 teams that could realistically make the playoffs. I think the Raiders are half a team because I don't know what's going on with Jimmy Garoppolo, and I don't know whether he's going to be the starter or not. But in an AFC like that, there are going to be like 4 or 5 teams who we say, how did they not make the playoffs with the way they played this year and their win total? There might be some 10-win teams that don't make the playoffs in the AFC because it's that good. I would say Baltimore, I would have them more around 11 or 12. I'd probably bet the over on 10.5. But again, if the Ravens won 10 games last year with Lamar being out for the back half of the season, going through a couple of injuries, I think they're a better team on paper this year than they were last year. But that's the thing, right? It's on paper. You got to translate that over to the field and make sure it's not just, I think a lot of people talk about the Cleveland Browns as like the paper champs of the league for the past like 4 or 5 seasons. And then, they haven't been able to perform. So you got to make it sure it translates to the field. But I'd probably put them more in the 11 or 12, 13 on the high end or 14 on the very high end of that scale, with 10 maybe being very much like on the little low end, with I think 9 or 8 being like, oh, they didn't have a good year. That something crazy must have happened.
Yeah, well, let's hope for health and no crazy, nada loco, no loco. Kevin, I always close out with, especially with my first time guests. Familia FFB, we focus on Latin flavor, and one of the greatest Latin flavors is Mexican food. Do you have any favorites? And I mean, you're in an area where there's really good seafood.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, look, I'm a big elotes guy. That is my thing. People are like, how can you eat that? I'm like, I'm a corn guy in general, but I love, and it's different everywhere you go, right? You got different flavors here and there, but I'm a huge elotes guy. So that'll be my pick for you.
Over 360 episodes. I think this is the first time one of my new guests has mentioned elotes.
All right.
Maybe once or twice. I know when in the early days of the show we talked elotes a couple times with my cousins, my primos. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Oh, great! Everybody, go enjoy an elote. It's especially if you could get it from a street vendor or something like that. Now that it's summer, it's they're out there. So. Gosh, thank you so much, Kevin, please feel free, pump anything and everything you got coming up, with training camp still a couple weeks away.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. You can find me over on the Locked On Ravens podcast. We're 5 days a week over there. So we're on video form on YouTube, also audio form. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get it. I'm also the managing editor over at the Ravens Wire. So 7 days a week, Ravens content over there. We're starting to, the lull period is starting to go away. More content is starting to come out over there. And then you can find me on Twitter at Oestreicher34. So yeah, that's where I am.
Where's the 34 come from?
A random number. I typed the Chaos Striker and I just slapped my keyboard, and that's what came up. That's the whole story.
That's awesome. I thought maybe there was a player or something like that.
Nothing like that.
Hey, you know what? The only reason 17 is my number is because that's the day I was born. So okay, I just picked it at random. So, oh man. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And once again, Familia, you're watching us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Give us the thumbs up. Drop a comment. I will be answering the comments. At the very least, I would like your comment. Even if you want to say anything about my hosting skills, feel free. Or if you want to throw in your Mexican food takes, please feel free to do that. So, also make sure you're going to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use that promo code Familia23. you're going to get matched up to that first $100. Again, this is me. I'm Jorge Martin 17 on Twitter. Everywhere else, it's Familia FFB, familiaffb.com. We got some content coming out. And if you want to listen to us, listen to these great podcasts, make sure you're going to Spotify, Apple, Google. Muchas gracias to our amigos over at Spotify for podcasters for getting us out there. Once again, Kevin, muchas gracias for joining us. Muchas gracias, everybody, for joining us. And remember, todos somos familia. Salud.